Ashley here, and I'm excited to announce that Thumper have just launched our newest range of portable dual battery packs in lithium. Now, Thumper's been on the market for over 20 years, specialising in a portable battery pack of AGM cells. But now, these new lithiums have been a long-awaited arrival to our range. Built with the highest quality LiPo4 lithium cells, these units are packed with features. Let's get into a few of them now. Now, the Thumper lithium range is available from anywhere of a 12 amp hour, a 24, a 40, a 60, and the 90. We offer multiple of sizes to suit every single person's need for a dual battery system. Built with similar characteristics in each of the units, we're going to break them down one by one, just so you get a bit of an understanding of what might suit your needs best. Now, the 60 amp hour. Now we're talking serious power. 60 amp hours here in the lithium is equivalent to around about 95 amp hours of an AGM power pack, and it's only 9 kilos. This unit has enough power to run a 50-litre compressor-driven fridge for around 3 to 4 days before needing to recharge via solar, 240 volt, or even off your vehicle. It comes included with a full wiring harness for the vehicle, so you can charge directly off your vehicle's charging system, providing it meets the criteria. Have a look at our specs there. Now, this unit here is built with 2 cigarette type sockets, stainless steel 16 amp rating. It's built with a 2-prong angle fridge type socket, which is commonly used on the fridges these days. It's built with a 2.4 5 volt dual USB socket, mainly designed for things like phones and iPads, docking stations, and your camera batteries. Anything that charges on a USB. In the side here, we also have a Merit or a Hella type plug. Again, quite common in the camper trailer industry or for the use of fridges. In the side here, we have a 2.1mm plug. This plug is an inlet and an outlet, but mainly designed for charging via our 240 volt battery chargers that we offer through the lithium range. Now, this can also be used as an output. So say for instance, a lot of LED lights these days will run directly off the 2.1mm plug. Just plug it straight in there and you're good to go. Internally built with circuit breaker protection, the unit is completely protected whilst running your appliances. On the other side, we have 2 50 amp Anderson connectors, rated to 50 amps of total capacity. These sockets are also connected via internal circuit breaker protection. On the front here, we have a little push button. This push button is only dedicated to the USB port. That means that when you have the unit in storage, you can turn off the power to the USB. The reason why we'd like to do this is because USBs do have a minor draw on their own, even with nothing plugged into it. So it's a good idea to be able to turn them off when they're not in use. Now, the fun part, the gauge. The gauge is so comprehensive, it's designed around a lithium battery. So what it will give you, it will tell you how many amp hours the unit is. A 60 amp hour will read 60 amp hours on the gauge. It will also tell you how much load you're putting the battery under. So say for instance you plug your fridge in, it's drawing 2 amps, it'll show you 2 amps on the gauge here. It will also do a conversion to wattage as well. Whatever load you're putting the battery pack under, it will also show you the remaining runtime that that load will have on this battery pack. So you get a real good idea for how long the battery will last before you're needing to recharge. Currently the gauge is not illuminated, meaning you can see it but it has no backlight. It will remain like this even when there's no power being discharged or input to the unit. This is a normal state of charge. Now, when you are actually discharging the unit, you'll have a green backlight that will illuminate on the gauge. You will also see the amp hours running down, you'll see the load that you're putting the unit under, and the remaining runtime. When you're charging, however, this gauge will flash. It'll flash that green illumination light to show you that the battery pack is actually charging. If the gauge is flashing and you have a load still running from the unit, it means that whatever charging input that you're putting into the unit is greater than the discharge, so it's charging the unit. It also means that the amps that will be reading will be showing you the the amount that is putting into the unit at that given time, and the remaining runtime will show you how long the unit will take until it's fully charged at that given input charge. The gauge will only stop flashing once the unit arrives to its full capacity again, being the full 60 amp hours. You'll see 60 amp hours illuminated on the gauge, and the gauge will stop flashing at that point. Then it's fully charged. The unit's built with a high quality BMS inside, which means that if you overload the unit at all, the BMS will shut it down to protect the batteries. If this does happen, you will need to connect an input charge to the battery. Something like a charger, a 240 volt charger, plug it into a cigarette socket. Anything that's charging the unit will reactivate that BMS system and you'll be ready to go again. The unit is absolutely foolproof. Comes included with a full wiring system for the vehicle, an option to upgrade to a DC charger if you want that, and we also have available units in the 60 amp hour with the DC charger built onto it already. So make sure you check those out on our page as well. Thanks guys. Okay, so let's get into these models with the DC charger built on. So Thumper offer two 60 amp hour variants with the DC charger. On this side, we have the Red Arc 25 amp DC charger. And on this side, we have the PowerTech 20 amp DC charger. Now both of these models are exceptional in their charge rates, and both are usually designed for charging a multiple of chemistries. However, these two units have been hardwired onto the lid of the Thumper and are designed for an optimum lithium battery charge. So what we have on each of these units is we have an external Anderson connector, both on the left and the right hand side of the Thumper itself. These two external Anderson connectors are hardwired directly in to the DC charger. So the DC charger will act as three different components. Number one, it will act as a voltage booster, meaning it will boost any low output voltage from vehicles. So you can charge that battery until it reaches 100%. Now, through the vehicle, we actually provide you a full wiring loom with each of these units, and you just need to install that into the vehicle. That wiring loom will work in conjunction with the DC chargers. Basically, it's a twin core cable that wires through the vehicle and will connect into the external Anderson labelled alternator input. This here will allow for the DC charger to boost the voltage through from your vehicle and provide that nice clean rate of charge through to your battery pack. Now the second component of a DC charger, it will act as the vehicle isolator. Now an isolator separates your secondary battery away from your starter battery. So that means you're never running the risk of flattening the main starter battery for any reason running alongside of your dual battery system. Completely safe, and that starter battery will just be there for starting the car. Now, again, the DC charger will do that itself, so you don't have to worry about that. It's just that straight line through to the alternator input, and the DC charger will act as that booster and that isolator. Now, the third component of a DC charger is the unit will act as a solar regulator. Now, solar regulators are needed in any panel that's over around 20 watts of power. Solar panels actually start up at around about 20 volts. So we need to install a regulator in the panel to ensure that we never overcharge the battery. If you already have a solar regulator in your panel, that's okay, but it would mean that we would no longer use the external Anderson labelled for the solar panel connection. You would have to use instead one of the other connections in the Thumper, be it either the two 50 amp Andersons that are piggybacked on top of one another, or one of the other cigarette or angle fridge socket, for instance. If you do want to use your unregulated solar panel input, you would just need to make sure that you're using an unregulated solar panel. Simply connect your panel directly into this Anderson connector, external on the unit, labelled unregulated solar input, and the regulator in the DC charger will do the rest for you. It's easy as that. Now there's one more component of this unit. Now looking on the side here, we have a override switch. Now this override switch is quite comprehensive, and I do cover it in our 90 amp hour video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw you over to that video and we can listen to what this switch here does. Now, what does an override mean? So basically, to understand what the override does, we need to understand how a DC charger would normally work. So, a quick schooling lesson. DC chargers are designed when, as soon as you turn on your ignition and your main starter battery reaches around about 13.2 volts, the DC charger will open up the circuit and allow for you to start charging your secondary battery. That's a voltage activation. So it needs the starter battery to reach 13.2 volts to open the circuit. Now, when you turn off your ignition, the starter battery will need to drain and reach 12.7 volts, which is still fully charged, but it needs the voltage to hit 12.7 before the DC charger will allow for the charging to no longer occur. It at that point will cut off away from the starter battery, protecting the starter battery at that point. That's all well and good when we have vehicles that will produce that 13.2 volts and allow for the DC charger to engage. But what happens if you have one of these newer model vehicles that has a very low alternator output? The only time that we can actually fix this problem is by overriding the voltage side of things in the DC charger. What that means is we go to having that DC charger be ignition activated. Ignition activated means that we switch on with the ignition and we turn off with the ignition. So this will happen immediately regardless of the voltage of the starter battery. Now, this override switch allows for this ignition override to be activated from the DC charger. So essentially, to use this connection here, we always recommend to install the wiring loom that we give you included with the unit. What that will allow for, again, is a relay type system. So that wiring loom that we include will allow for the line to start charging with the ignition on and the line to isolate with the ignition is off. So that will protect your starter battery. This override switch here, by pressing it in, it will illuminate blue. Once it's illuminated blue, we know that we've overridden the voltage side of the DC charger. At that point, the DC charger will work immediately, regardless of any voltage in the charging system. It will also then continue to be linked to anything that's on that line. So if you turn off the ignition, then the only time this will actually be isolated away from the vehicle's starter battery is when you do hardwire that vehicle loom into the vehicle, because that loom is what will separate you from the car cranking battery. By pressing this off again, it will no longer illuminate blue, and what that means is we go back to the voltage side of things. So the DC charger again will engage and disengage according to the voltage of that starter battery. Now, if this doesn't make sense, that's okay. You're welcome to call us and we can explain anything further. Otherwise, check out our literature that's available on our website as well, and this can go into some further information about this connection. Basically, all you need to know is that it works to override the voltage of the DC charger to allow for it to start charging as soon as the ignition is switched on and isolate as soon as the ignition is off. Thanks guys for listening. Check out our next video.